G'day, how's it going? And welcome to another episode of Test Drive. Today, we'll be looking at some of Corning's variety of cassettes. Andrew, what do we have here?
So what we've got over here, we've got some MTP Pass-Through Cassettes in both edge 8 and 12. We've got some LC to MTP cassettes, so MTP in the back and LC at the front, once again in edge 8 and 12. We have a field spliceable cassette, which also goes into the edge housing, so it's an edge spliceable cassette. And then we also have some of their unique cassettes that we'll just talk about a little bit. One being a tap cassette. And the other one being a direct jumper cassette. So what these are an edge pass-through cassette. These ones are in a multi-mode range, but you can get them in single mode as well. You can see this one here has only got 4 MTP because it's the edge 8, so it has an ability for 4 in there, and this, the edge 12 one, has an ability of 6. You also can get these cassettes if you want to in a 4 for the edge 12 solution, but we're just showing you the 6 at the moment, which is the most standard one that we've got. This cassette here allows for, and I'm just going to use the piggyback off this other cassette here at the moment. This is an MTP connection. The MTP connection is usually used for a higher bandwidth solution, so allowing for a lot more data to be going through. It has 12 fiber cores in the front of it, and it allows to mate with also a pin version in the other side to make sure that we've got a connection going through. It allows for that higher density once again, or the higher bandwidth solution for the cross connects, or for the cabling patching going through.
Okay, yeah.
So you can see here they've got some unique dust covers on the front of them. So the dust cover makes sure that no dust is going in if the port is not being used, which is easily flipped down, and then the cable is connected into it like so. And exactly the same thing in the back of the cassette, depending on, this one is a non-pin, so we would have a pinned MTP going into the other side, and it once again will just click straight in and allow you then to manage it going through. So this would be looking like at the back of the inside the Phobot. So now we can put a pinned connection straight into the front of that one. So once again, like I said, we've got that. This is the one for the edge 12 solution, so the larger tray that we saw in the Phobot in our last test drive, and that one is the edge 8 solution for the smaller trays. So still the same amount of density, just that the cassettes are a little bit smaller for those. So this MTP pass-through cassette will be used, like I said, for the high bandwidth solution for 40 gig and above. It's made for the MTP solution trunk to go through. Normally that MTP connection will either go down into a QSFP, which is once again that 40 gig and above solution inside a piece of equipment, or can also be into a harness cable that we'll talk about a little later on, which can then break out the channels and into an LC into the pieces of equipment. What it does is it allows for a lot more fibre to be connected in a lot higher density. It also then limits the losses between, because you're not breaking it out and breaking out again. So it's an ability to be able to take this and keep it still as a structured piece of cabling. So your trunks are going into the back of it, and then you're patching out the front. Rather than the trunk going straight into the piece of equipment, this then gives you the opportunity for the plug and play. Those MTPs can also come out, and then they can go into the other cassettes, which we'll talk about in a second.
So if I was a client, where would I use this?
So why I design to have these cassettes inside their network would be, these are the high bandwidth solution, They will allow for us to connect straight into the MTP connectors on the other side. So if I know that I've got a customer who's got a QSFP or that 40 gig and 100 gig sort of connection to it, I would be utilising this, because I know that either if they're going to use it as LC on channels for that higher bandwidth, or if they were going to be using it for an MTP connection straight into equipment, this would be the right cassette to be utilising. So the 8 and the 12, the only difference between it when you're doing MTP, they probably have more in an Edge 8, because when you're doing an Edge 8 solution you're already talking about high bandwidth. For the Edge 12, you're using a lot of LC connections, and you might have some of these 40 to 100 gig or 42 to above gig solution. That's where you'd be utilizing that only for that section. But if you're talking already about the Edge 8, the Edge 8 is set for that higher bandwidth, the more speed. You've got faster transceivers, so that's where you'd be utilizing the Edge 8 solution, because you're not using those middle pairs of the 12 core fiber, you're only using the Edge two lanes of 4 cores on the other sides of them. So the next ones that we've got over here, so we'll pick those ones next. So these ones are the LC to MTP connections. So what this allows for, it allows for that 12 core MTP connection that we talked about earlier to plug straight into the back of this module. The module then allows for LC connections out the front. And the one thing that Corning do very well, and they were the people that patented it, the actual internals of this make sure it's called a universal pinning. The universal pinning of all the different pigtails means that you don't have to have an A side cassette and a B side cassette. So some of the other vendors have had to do that to try and make it. So you don't have to worry about buying 2 different parts. You can buy just one part. It goes on either end, and what you've got coming out at 1 and 2 gets reversed on the other side. So it's very, very simple as far as understanding your patching topology and how you're going to actually patch out your network connections. Once again, these have got a very nice little shutter on them, but that little shutter means that once you actually plug into the duplex LC connection into that side there, that dust cover moves backwards. Once you unplug it, it'll remain, the shutter will come back out. So it make sure that you don't have any dust. Obviously with fiber, you've got to make sure it's clean. If it's not clean, you're not going to get the same throughput that you normally would. So
smart mechanism. Yeah.
Lots more losses, yeah.
Have you had experienced any problems in the past using this?
I guess the issue that we've got, especially when the cassettes are so small, is that the connections in. So with some of the lower range patch leads that you might use, if you have just an LC duplex patch lead, which isn't one of the Corning patch leads, which don't have the pull-push, I guess, connection to it, sometimes they can be a little bit finicky. I don't have the biggest hands, but you can already see that, like to try and pull in and out, especially in the Phobot that we talked about earlier, it can be a little bit difficult. So they've remedied that by having the pull-push and having the big clip on the outside of it.
Oh, innovative.
Yeah. So when we've got a fully loaded Phobot, especially using those thin Furcation patch leads, we can manage that all very, very well. If you've got the larger patch leads, you can get quite bulky at the front. The labelling connection can't be pushed in there, and it can become quite messy in there. So these are quite good. As far as our technicians are concerned, this is probably one of their favourite that they like to use. And that one you've got in your hand there, exactly the same. That one has only got 8 duplex connections coming out of the MTP, because the way that Edge 8 works, it doesn't use the middle 4 laneways, whereas the Edge 12 does use those middle 4 laneways. So it allows for more connections to come out onto the front. The Edge 8 cassette is, like I said, is more usually used for the more high bandwidth solutions. Okay, the next cassette we've got here, this is quite a neat little cassette. So sometimes we'll especially in office environments, or if we're running between different data center suites, you might have a cable that you don't actually know the length of until you're installing it. So by using an MTP trunk, normally they come in certain measurements. If we don't have the ability to really know that before we're installing it, we can actually install a fiber, just a normal fiber, and we can actually splice into an Edge cassette. So that becomes quite handy, especially if you don't have the MTP connection. So this one here is a single mode splice cassette. You can see it still has the LC at the front and still has a good labeling there, so you can tell which ports are which ports. And the fiber actually comes in onto the side there, and here you have inside it, these are all the pigtails that we've got coming out. And those pigtails will be spliced, and you've got a little splice cassette in here which allows you to splice them and hold them in there neatly. Once again, this comes in both single mode and multi-mode, and it gives you that ability to, if you've got a fiber that you want to splice, you can put it into there. It also becomes quite handy, especially if you have some cross-vendor connections and you want to keep everything in the same Phobot, which is a Corning Phobot. You can then utilize another fiber connection that's coming in if it's a different brand, depending on, sometimes in data centers we would have They have a standard brand they use for their cross connects. When the cross connects comes in, we can terminate it onto one of these to make sure it sits in the same phobot, it looks all the same, and everything is exactly identical. So these last two, these are both Edge 8 cassettes. This one is a tap cassette. So what a tap cassette does is this one is almost like a pass-through, but you have MTPs going in and MTPs going out. The tap is another connection that will just go off to a piece of equipment. The equipment will then monitor what the data flow through is going. It doesn't actually take the data out, but it measures the amount of data that's going through those two different things. So that can be important for some of our customers, especially large financials that want to have some kind of monitoring idea about how much of data is actually flowing through their network. This last cassette here is an Edge 8 LC connection, but instead of having the MTP like we have here where we would plug it in to the back of it, like this one. So this one you can see we've got the MTP plugging in the back. Well, this one's already been terminated into here, so it's just been terminated into those LC connectors. And we've got on the other side here, we have got a MTP connection. So the reason for this, or the way that I would utilize this in my design, if I wanted to present LC connections from an MTP connector going in, so allowing for all the different channels to go out because I might be connecting to a piece of equipment, this is where this would suit, because I could plug this straight into the piece of equipment, which would have a QSFP to allow for MTP connection, and then I can break out the channels into LC so that I can then move those 10 gig channels to wherever I'd like to take them.
Okay, that makes sense. And so if I was a client, where would I use this?
Wherever you wanted to break out the MTP or the connection into LC without having too many plug connections into it. As you can see, it's not very long, so it probably would go in the same rack. So where you have somewhere in the same rack, you have an MTP connection that you want to break out into LC. This is a nice little module for it because it only has the termination in the LC and only one in the MTP, so you save yourself a couple of connections, and every connection that you have is a loss. So trying to minimize the loss of their network. And that's the range of cassettes from Corning in the Edge format. I hope that gives you a little bit more detail on what's available in the Edge Corning solution in cassettes.
Thanks guys for watching.
Thank you.